In the stillness of the cemetery, the world seemed to pause as mourners drifted away, leaving Alex Thompson standing alone at the edge of his wife's freshly filled grave. The funeral had been grand, befitting Rose Anderson's status as a beloved philanthropist and business mogul. Yet, Alex's thoughts were not on her legacy, but on the wealth she left behind. The soft scent of marigolds mixed with the lingering bitterness of freshly turned soil. Alex, an impeccably groomed man in his late 40s, adjusted his tie and turned toward Jessica Turner, his young, striking secretary. She had been his confidant and lover during the waning years of his marriage. Today, she stood beside him, her sleek black dress clinging to her frame, a picture of sorrow for all who might glance her way. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Alex asked quietly, his voice low and calculating. Jessica nodded. "I'll meet you at the courthouse. Everything will fall into place." The next morning, the sun rose over San Francisco, painting the city in hues of gold and gray. Alex arrived at the courthouse with a spring in his step. His tailored gray suit reflected his confidence, though a flicker of unease shadowed his eyes. He was here to claim what he believed was his, Rose's vast empire. Jessica was already there, poised and composed, waiting outside the notary's office. As they entered, the hallway's sterile smell of old paper and disinfectant did little to mask the tension brewing between them. Inside the office, Alex's composure faltered when he saw Luke Anderson, Rose's nephew, sitting calmly in a chair. Luke, a man in his mid-30s with sharp features, greeted Alex with a cordial smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What brings you here, Luke?" Alex asked, his voice tight. "I'm here for Aunt Rose's will reading," Luke replied simply. Before Alex could respond, the notary, Mr. Phillips, entered the room, carrying a file that seemed to hold the weight of the world. He gestured for everyone to take a seat. "Mr. Thompson, Miss Turner, Mr. Anderson," the notary began, adjusting his glasses. "There have been some recent developments concerning Mrs. Anderson's will." Alex leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "Developments? What kind of developments?" Phillips hesitated before opening the file. Mrs. Anderson made a significant amendment to her will just days before her passing. She decided to allocate 60% of her estate to charitable causes. The room fell silent, the air thick with disbelief. Alex's jaw tightened, his fingers clenching the arms of his chair. 60%. Alex's voice rose. "That's preposterous. Rose would never." Phillips interrupted, his tone firm. Mrs. Anderson's decision was legally documented and witnessed. Her intent was clear. Jessica, pale and visibly shaken, whispered, "What about the rest of the estate?" Phillips adjusted his glasses again. "The remaining 40% is to be divided among a few named beneficiaries, including Mr. Luke Anderson." Luke's calm demeanor didn't waver, but there was a flicker of something. Satisfaction, perhaps, in his eyes. "And me?" Alex demanded, his voice trembling with anger. "You have been allocated a modest portion," Phillips said, his tone diplomatic. "Enough to maintain your current lifestyle, as specified by Mrs. Anderson." Alex shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the tiled floor. "This is an outrage. She was my wife. That fortune is mine by right." Luke's voice cut through Alex's tirade, calm yet resolute. "Maybe Aunt Rose knew something you didn't, Uncle Alex. Maybe she saw what truly mattered." Alex's eyes narrowed. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Luke stood, his presence commanding despite his understated demeanor. "Aunt Rose believed in using her wealth for the greater good. She wanted to make a difference in the world, not just accumulate riches for the sake of it." Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her chair, glancing between the two men. Her dreams of a life of luxury were crumbling before her eyes, but she dared not speak. The notary cleared his throat, diffusing the tension. "Mr. Thompson, you have the right to contest the will, but I must advise you that such a process would be lengthy, costly, and unlikely to succeed." Alex's mind raced. He had spent years positioning himself for this moment, years enduring a marriage devoid of love. And now, with everything slipping through his fingers, he was left grappling with a harsh reality. In the days that followed, Alex found himself plagued by memories of Rose. Her laughter echoed in his mind, her unwavering kindness a stark contrast to the man he had become. He recalled the countless times she had spoken about her dreams of leaving a lasting impact on the world, dreams he had dismissed as naive. One evening, as Alex wandered through Rose's study, he stumbled upon a journal tucked away in a drawer. Its pages were filled with her thoughts, her hopes, and most strikingly, her awareness of Alex's true nature. "I know Alex's heart has strayed," one entry read, "but I pray that, someday, he finds his way back to what truly matters." Tears blurred Alex's vision as he read her words. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of genuine sorrow, not for the loss of her fortune, but for the loss of the woman he had once loved. Months passed, and Alex began to change. He sold the luxury car, downsized his home, and immersed himself in charitable work, using the modest inheritance Rose had left him to honor her legacy. Jessica, unable to adapt to this new life, left without a word, her dreams of opulence shattered. Luke, witnessing Alex's transformation, extended a tentative olive branch. Together, they worked on projects that continued Rose's philanthropic efforts, building schools, funding medical research, and creating opportunities for those in need. In the end, Alex found a sense of purpose that had eluded him for most of his life. Rose's final gift had been more than monetary. It had been a chance for redemption, a chance to rebuild his life on a foundation of love and compassion. It depicts that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the lives we touch and the legacy we leave behind. A legacy's echo. The air in the courthouse remained tense long after Alex stormed out, his mind a whirlwind of anger and denial. Jessica followed closely behind him, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The echo of their departure faded, leaving Luke and Mr. Phillips alone in the quiet office. Luke stayed seated, staring at the stack of legal documents in front of him. The calm he had displayed earlier was a thin veil over the storm brewing within. Rose's decision had shocked even him, though he couldn't help but admire her foresight. She had always been a step ahead, even in matters of the heart. "Mr. Anderson," the notary interrupted Luke's thoughts, "I trust you understand the gravity of Mrs. Anderson's decisions." Luke nodded. "I do. She wanted to ensure her life's work didn't go to waste. And she was right. This was the only way to make sure it wouldn't." Phillips hesitated, then leaned forward. "Forgive me for asking, but do you think Alex will contest the will?" Luke's eyes darkened. "He'll try." But Aunt Rose was meticulous. She left no cracks for him to exploit. Her legacy is protected. Outside, Alex paced furiously near his car, his anger radiating off him in waves. Jessica, trying to calm him, placed a hand on his arm. "Alex, we need to think this through," she said carefully. "If you go back in there and make a scene, it'll only make things worse." He spun to face her, his face contorted in frustration. "Worse? How can it get worse, Jessica? I've been betrayed. By her, by that damn lawyer, and even by Luke." Jessica's voice softened, though her patience was thinning. "Listen to me. If we're going to fight this, we need a plan. You can't just lash out without thinking." For a moment, Alex stared at her, his breathing ragged. Then, something in her tone struck him. He realized she wasn't speaking from loyalty, but self-preservation. Jessica's investment in this was personal. Her dreams of wealth were tied directly to his. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Fine," he snapped, his voice low. "Let's regroup. But don't think for a second I'm giving up. Rose wanted to make a fool of me, and I won't let her." Jessica nodded, though a flicker of doubt crossed her face. That night, Alex sat alone in his study, the will spread across his desk. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, searching for loopholes, inconsistencies, anything that could undermine Rose's final wishes. But the more he read, the more her clarity of thought became evident. Every clause, every allocation of funds, every beneficiary, each decision was deliberate and ironclad. For the first time, Alex felt truly cornered. He poured himself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid trembling in his hand. As he stared at the documents, his mind drifted back to the years he and Rose had shared. Rose had been everything Alex wasn't: kind, selfless, and endlessly optimistic. He had admired those traits once, even loved them. But as their lives grew more complex and their ambitions diverged, Alex had become resentful. Her dedication to philanthropy, which he once found inspiring, now felt like a distraction from their shared future. Or so he had thought. Now, in the stillness of the night, Alex began to question everything. Had he ever truly understood her, or had his own greed blinded him to the woman she had always been? Meanwhile, Luke returned to the modest apartment he called home. It was a far cry from the luxury Alex had grown accustomed to, but it was enough. As he placed the will on his kitchen table, he couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility Rose had left him. Luke poured himself a cup of coffee and opened a leather-bound journal he had kept for years. Inside were notes from his conversations with Rose, her dreams, her fears, and her plans for the future. She had confided in him in a way she never had with Alex, and he felt both honored and burdened by that trust. One entry caught his eye. "Luke, you've always understood me better than anyone. If anything happens to me, I need you to carry this forward. Alex will never see beyond the numbers, but you will. Promise me you'll protect what we've built, not for me, but for those who need it most." Luke closed the journal, his chest tight. He hadn't realized how much she had anticipated. Rose hadn't just planned for her legacy. She had planned for Alex's inevitable resistance, and she had entrusted Luke to stand firm against it. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations and tense meetings. Alex, true to his word, filed a contestation of the will, citing undue influence and lack of capacity. His arguments were weak, but his determination was relentless. Jessica stood by him, though her once unwavering support began to falter as the reality of their situation set in. Luke, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to honor Rose's wishes. He partnered with the charity she had chosen, ensuring that the funds were allocated efficiently and transparently. He also began to oversee the transformation of Rose's properties into community centers, shelters, and educational hubs. Amid the chaos, the media caught wind of the dispute, turning it into a public spectacle. Headlines painted Alex as a grieving widower fighting for justice, or, depending on the outlet, a greedy opportunist clinging to a fortune he hadn't earned. Luke, meanwhile, became a reluctant hero, praised for his integrity and commitment to his aunt's vision. The contrasting narratives only deepened the rift between the two men. But beneath the animosity, a quiet realization was taking root in Alex's mind. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Alex found himself walking aimlessly through the city. His feet carried him to a construction site where one of Rose's properties was being renovated. Through the chain-link fence, he watched as workers transformed the old building into a shelter for homeless families. For the first time, Alex saw what Rose had envisioned, not just numbers on a balance sheet, but lives being changed. He thought of the countless arguments they'd had about her idealistic pursuits, the nights he had spent belittling her dreams while she quietly persevered. Standing there, Alex felt a wave of shame, so profound it left him breathless. He had spent his life chasing wealth, yet here was Rose's true legacy: hope, opportunity, and compassion made tangible. The turning point came a week later. Alex withdrew his contestation of the will, shocking everyone, including Jessica. "Why?" she demanded, her voice rising in frustration. "We still had a chance." Alex looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because I'd finally realized what Rose was trying to teach me, and it's too late to fix what I've done. But I can at least honor her now." Jessica stared at him, her disbelief quickly giving way to anger. Without another word, she left, slamming the door behind her. Alex didn't try to stop her. In the months that followed, Alex began volunteering at the very organizations Rose had supported. At first, he was met with skepticism, his reputation preceding him. But over time, his genuine effort to contribute began to shift perceptions. Luke, though cautious, eventually invited Alex to collaborate on some of the projects. Their relationship was far from repaired, but there was a newfound respect between them. For Alex, the journey was humbling. He had lost the fortune he once craved, but in its place, he found something far more valuable: purpose, redemption, and a chance to leave the world better than he had found it. Rose's legacy had become his, not through inheritance, but through transformation. The unfolding redemption. Months turned into a year, and the echoes of Rose Anderson's legacy continued to ripple through the lives she had touched. In the sprawling heart of San Francisco, once empty buildings now buzzed with life. The shelters were filled with families rebuilding their lives, and the community centers brimmed with children laughing, learning, and finding hope where none had existed before. For Alex Thompson, the transformation was slow but profound. The man who had once stood on the edge of his wife's grave with cold calculation now found himself kneeling on the floors of those very community centers, painting walls alongside volunteers and listening to the stories of those he had once overlooked. One evening, Alex stood in the dimly lit gymnasium of a newly renovated community center. The air was filled with the sound of a small choir practicing for a local event. Their voices, raw but hopeful, resonated in the space, weaving a melody that seemed to settle into Alex's very bones. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a faint smile on his lips. "Didn't think I'd see you here this late," a voice said from behind him. Alex turned to see Luke Anderson standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. The younger man's sharp gaze was softened by an air of cautious camaraderie. Over the past year, their relationship had evolved from open hostility to something that resembled mutual respect. "I didn't think I'd see me here either," Alex replied, his tone light but sincere. He gestured toward the choir. "They're good. It's grounding, isn't it?" Luke stepped closer, nodding. Aunt Rose would have loved this. Music was always her way of connecting with people. She used to say that it speaks what words can't. Alex swallowed hard, memories of Rose surfacing unbidden. He hadn't thought about her love for music in years. She used to hum while working late at night, her melodies filling their home with warmth he hadn't appreciated until it was gone. She was right, Alex said softly. It does. As the months passed, Alex immersed himself deeper into the projects Rose had left behind. He took up the role of an advocate, speaking at fundraising events, negotiating with city officials, and rallying support for the causes Rose had championed. Each speech, each handshake, each signed agreement felt like a step toward atonement, a way to honor the woman he had failed in life. Jessica's absence no longer stung. In her departure, Alex saw the reflection of his old self, someone consumed by materialism, blind to the value of connection and purpose. He wished her well but felt no longing for the life they had once planned together. One crisp autumn morning, Alex arrived at a small park nestled in one of the city's underserved neighborhoods. The park had been one of Rose's dreams, a safe space for families to gather, play, and find respite from the challenges of urban life. The grand opening was scheduled for the following week, but Alex often found himself drawn to the site, watching as workers planted flowers, assembled benches, and painted murals. As he walked through the park, he spotted a young girl sitting on the edge of a newly installed fountain, her legs swinging back and forth. She held a small sketchpad, her pencil moving quickly across the page. Curious, Alex approached. "What are you drawing?" he asked gently. The girl looked up, startled at first, but then she smiled. "The park," she said, holding up her sketch. The drawing was simple but vibrant, capturing the spirit of the space with a child's unfiltered perspective. "It's beautiful," Alex said, genuinely impressed. "What's your name?" "Amara," she replied. "My mom says we'll come here a lot now. She says it's safe here." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. "That's good to hear. I hope you and your mom enjoy it." Amara nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Did you make this park?" For a moment, Alex hesitated. "I helped," he said, "but it was someone else's dream." "Your wife?" Amara asked, surprising him with her insight. "Yes," Alex admitted, his voice soft. "She wanted to make places like this for people like you and your mom." Amara smiled again. "She must have been really nice." "She was," Alex said, his heart aching with a mixture of pride and regret. The grand opening of the park was a resounding success. Families gathered in droves, children laughing as they ran through the playground, while local musicians performed on a small stage. Alex stood near the edge of the crowd, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. Luke joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Alex, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. "She'd be proud of this," Luke said, gesturing toward the crowd. Alex took a sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed on a group of children playing tag. "I hope so. It's the least I can do." Luke studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You've changed, Alex. I didn't think it was possible, but you've proven me wrong." Alex chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "I didn't think it was possible either. But Rose, she had a way of showing people who they could be, even if they didn't see it themselves." Luke nodded. "She believed in you, even when you didn't deserve it." "I know," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to that." Years later, Alex stood on the stage of a gala held in Rose's honor. The room was filled with people whose lives had been touched by her legacy, beneficiaries, philanthropists, and community leaders who had been inspired by her vision. As Alex began his speech, his voice steady but laden with emotion, he spoke not of his own contributions, but of Rose's unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. "She taught me that true wealth isn't measured by what we have, but by what we give," Alex said, his eyes scanning the crowd. Her kindness, her vision, and her love transformed countless lives, including my own. "I stand here today not as the man I was, but as the man she believed I could be." The room erupted in applause, a testament to the impact of one woman's dream, and the redemption of a man who had nearly lost himself in its shadow. As Alex stepped off the stage, he felt a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he was no longer chasing wealth or status. He was living a life of purpose, one that echoed the values Rose had held dear. And in that he found a kind of immortality, not for himself, but for the legacy they now shared, a lesson in redemption. As the years passed, Alex Thompson's transformation became a story that others told, a tale of a man who had turned his life around after nearly losing everything. The park, the community centers, and the shelters all stood as living testaments to Rose Anderson's vision and Alex's redemption. His name, once whispered with scorn, now evoked admiration for the man who had embraced his second chance with humility and purpose. One quiet afternoon, Alex found himself at the park again. It had become his refuge, a place where he could reflect on the past and draw strength from the vibrant life around him. He sat on a bench near the fountain, watching children play and families gather under the shade of newly planted trees. Amara, now a teenager, approached him with a sketchpad under her arm. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, her smile bright. Alex looked up, his face lighting with recognition. "Amara, still drawing? I see." She nodded, sitting beside him, and flipping open her pad to reveal a detailed sketch of the park. "I'm working on something for the art show at school. I thought I'd draw the place that inspires me the most." Alex smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "It's beautiful, Amara. Rose would have loved it." Amara tilted her head. "I was thinking about what you said before, about this being her dream. I think she'd be proud of you, too. You've done a lot to keep her dream alive." Her words struck a chord deep within Alex. He had spent years trying to prove himself worthy of Rose's faith, but in that moment, he realized something profound. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a future that honored the lessons of it. That evening, Alex returned home to his modest apartment, where the walls were adorned with photographs and mementos of the projects he had overseen. On his desk lay a framed picture of Rose, her kind eyes and warm smile, a constant reminder of the woman who had set him on this path. He picked up her journal, which had become his guide in the years since her passing. As he flipped through its pages, one entry stood out, a passage he had read countless times, but now carried new meaning. True wealth isn't what we take with us, but what we leave behind. It's in the lives we touch, the hope we inspire, and the love we share. If we live with kindness, we live forever. Alex closed the journal, his heart full. He had spent much of his life chasing the wrong kind of legacy, but now he understood that the greatest legacy was one of love, compassion, and service to others. At the next gala held in Rose's honor, Alex took the stage once again, this time with Amara by his side. The young artist had been chosen to unveil her painting of the park, a piece she had titled Rose's Dream. The audience erupted in applause as the canvas was revealed, a vibrant depiction of the park filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, united by the joy of community. As Alex spoke, his voice steady and filled with conviction, he shared his final lesson. Life has a way of humbling us, of stripping away the illusions we build around ourselves. I thought wealth was about power and possessions, but Rose taught me that it's about people. It's about giving, growing, and finding meaning in lifting others. That's a lesson I wish I had learned sooner, but one I'll carry with me forever. When the applause faded, Alex stepped down from the stage, content in a way he had never been before. He had found his redemption, not through wealth or recognition, but through the quiet, persistent act of doing good. And in that, Rose's legacy lived on, not just in the lives of others, but in the man she had believed he could become. The story of Alex and Rose teaches us that redemption is always possible, no matter how far we've strayed. True wealth is not measured by what we accumulate, but by the positive impact we leave behind. Even in our darkest moments, we have the power to change, to honor the lessons of those we've lost, and to create a legacy that endures. Alex's journey is a reminder that it's never too late to choose kindness, purpose, and love, and that in doing so, we find the truest form of fulfillment.